So in this episode, we're going to talk about basic animation in Maya, and we're going to do what's called a turntable animation. So this is an example of a turntable animation. It's just a simple rotation of a model on a table that allows a viewer to see the detail of the model. Now we're not going to focus on modeling, we're going to focus on animation. So conceptually, what are we trying to do? We basically have a 3D object in the center of our scene, and we have a camera that is pointing at that object. If we imagine that camera moving and rotating around the object, so at the next time, at say time 100, that camera is at a different location, then we're basically moving around the object. The way that Maya does animation is called using keyframe animation. Keyframe animation is essentially the idea that you create these moments in time where you want the animation to be, and it will interpolate or figure out all the intermediate points. So this is really one of the cool things about keyframe animation, which derives from the history of animation, in which you had animators that would draw the kind of keyframes, the important frames in a scene. And you had people that were tweeners that would draw the interpolator in between frames, and they were called tweeners. The same concept is applied in Maya and keyframe animation, except it's all done digitally, and it figures out how to interpolate those frames automatically. So we create, we move the camera at the keyframes, and we specify that we want the camera to be here at time 0. We want it to be here at time 100. We want it to be at the top at time 200, and so on. And it will automatically interpolate and figure out all the frames in between. How many frames are there? Well, there's roughly 30 frames in every second. In film, there's 24 frames per second typically. We're going to be working with 30 frames per second. That means to get 1 second of film, we're going to have 30 frames. I'm doing 400 here so that this happens over about 13 seconds. So basically, it's going to take about 13 seconds to rotate around the object. And these numbers here, 100, are the actual frame numbers. They're not times. So this is frame 100, frame 200, frame 300, and the ending will be frame 400. So that's our goal. This is what we're going to try and do in Maya today. So let's see how we do this. First, we need to make a 3D object and do some very simple rendering, and then we're going to start doing keyframing. So let's get started. We'll start our turntable by finding an object we want to render. So you can find one online. There are sites such as archive3d.net and others that you can find some models. You may need to convert them. Or if you want to just get started, we can just use the content browser. So we go to Windows, General Editors, Content Browser. We'll find a set of objects that we can pick from. So there are a few different things to choose from. It's a fairly small set, so you can find some others online. I'm going to just start with Dolphin, for example. I'll double click on it to get it to appear, and then I need to close this. If you get black or you don't see anything or something else, it's almost always because the object comes in too large or the scale is different. So first thing you need to do is just use your navigation tools and just zoom out. You can move the middle mouse wheel and zoom out as far as you can until you see the object. It might be too small or too large or positioned differently. So you just need to zoom out until you see the whole thing. And then I really suggest that you scale it down, use the scale tool and scale it down until it's the right size relative to the grid. So it's like kind of some normal size. I'm going to move it up just a little bit. So once you have this, I'm just taking a look at the object. So notice when I'm using the tracking here, I'm just tumbling to look at the object. This is not an animation, right? It's just me looking around. In order to make an animation, I need an actual camera in the scene. Not just me looking at it through the viewport, but need to create a camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Create, Cameras, Camera and Aim. And I'll have a camera here. Now, I may need to move this camera out so I can see it. And you can see that camera has two parts to it. The camera has the aim point, which is where is the camera pointing, and it has the camera itself, which is this little camera icon. So I want to put the aim of the camera in the center of the object because I want my view to rotate around the object. I need that that point of where it's going to rotate around to be kind of specified as the center. So I'm going to move that aim point towards the center and keep the camera out here at a distance. Now, to simplify this, it's actually going to be helpful to be able to look through the camera and see things going on at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to close the attribute editor and kind of free up this space here. And I just do that by right-clicking on attribute editor and doing close tab. I could also just pull it out and then click on the close button, free up some space. And then I'm going to get a 2-panel layout by going to panels. I'm going to do layouts and do 2 panes side by side. So I get 2 views next to each other. In the right view, I want to see it from overhead so I can see how the camera is moving. So I'm going to go to panels, orthographic, top to see from the top. And I can use the mouse wheel. I can do any kind of navigation in here that I want. It's limited to top view navigation. So I can hold down the Alt and use the middle in order to pan, or I can just use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And now I see from the top, I see my object and I see the camera. Okay. On the left side, I want to look through the camera, this camera here. I want to actually see what it looks like from that camera. So I'm going to go to panels, perspective, and choose camera 1, which is the name of that particular camera. If I ever want to go back and just do 3D view, I can just do panels, perspective, PRSP, which is the default view, or I can look out the camera by going perspective camera 1. So now I'm looking from this camera, and you can see that I can still do my navigation in this view. I can still rotate, and when I let go, the camera is actually moved. So which makes sense. Like I'm adjusting the camera, and so that camera moves because I'm looking out of a real camera, a camera that's in the scene. So that kind of sets the stage for what we want to do. Now, as we mentioned in our kind of goal, we want to kind of have that camera move over time around the object. And that's kind of what we're going to focus on now. The first thing we're going to do to animate is we're going to kind of set up our animation. There are a few things we have to do. So first, we need to set the length of the animation to kind of how long we want this to be. And we know that we want 400 frames. So we come to this area, which indicates the kind of maximum frame number. We're going to change that to set the end of the range to 400. And we can see that kind of like this area here is the time slider, this time bar. It shows us things happening over time. So we have 0 on the left as a first frame, and then you have frame numbers increasing to the right. The other thing we want to do, so we have 400 frames, we want to set the frames per second. As we mentioned, we're going to use 30 frames per second. So we're going to set this to 30 here in this area. So we have 30 frames per second. We may need to set this back to 400. And the last thing I want to make sure you do, a couple things, is go to this on the very right, we have the playback settings. I want you to go to, open this up, go to time slider, and then scroll down and make sure that this may initially be set to play every frame, which will cause the playback to be too fast. We want it to happen at real time so we see what it's really going to look like. We're going to set the playback speed to 30 FPS by 1, which means playback at the real speed that it's supposed to be played back at. So we're going to do 30 SPF by 1 as our playback speed, and then we're going to save that. And the final thing is to enter animation mode. We click this button, and this is keyframe toggle. That's going to turn on the ability to automatically add keyframes. So this is going to enable animation mode. So now we have the ability to animate things, and we're ready to start doing some keyframing. So here's how this works. What you're going to do is you're going to select an object. That is the object you want to be keyframed. You're going to press the S key in order to, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to select the camera object. Okay, I can't do this just here. I have to select the actual object of the camera. I'm going to press the S key to tell it that I want a keyframe. And then I'm going to rotate the camera just a little bit using the navigation on the left side in order to indicate that it's the rotation that I want to animate. So those 3 things are needed in order to indicate an animation for in-betweening. I need to specify the object that I want to animate. I need to press the S key to tell it that I want to animate starting at time 0. And I need to rotate or translate the object slightly just so that it knows that that's the thing that I'm going to animate. Once I've done that, it's ready to do the next frame. And so I'm going to go over here to time 100. I'm going to move my slider over to time 100. And now I can rotate the camera again. And this time it's going to change in the right-hand view to be at time 100. I can also do some panning a little bit if I like, if I want to get a different angle. And if I move my slider now between 0 and 100, it has automatically interpolated and figured out how this should look between these. Notice I'm doing this in the left viewport so I can actually see what it looks like. If I were to click on the right viewport and move the slider, I would just see the camera moving there, but it only updates one panel at a time. So if I want to see it from the camera, I need to make sure that I'm clicked on the left. So selecting the camera again, notice that there's no keyframes here now. There's no, those little red lines are indicators that you have keyframes. I need to make sure that I have an object selected, and then I will see its keyframes. So this tells me that the camera has a red keyframe here and a red keyframe here. So I'm going to continue this. And go up to time 200. And now I'm just going to rotate again the camera view to the back of the object. And then I'm going to go up to time 300 and do another angle here. And time 400 at the very end, and bring it back to the beginning. So that sets up the 4 keyframes, 300, 200, 100, 0, and there's only 4 frames that are keys, 0, 1, 2, 3, 400, and all the in-between are being automatic. So because we set up the playback speed to be 1:1, 30 frames per second, now I can click this button here, which is play. So on the bottom right, I have the play button. And if I have the left panel selected and I click play, then over about 13 seconds, I should see the whole animation. Okay. So that's it for basic animation. I've kind of shown you how to create keyframes and how to move the object during those keyframes. We can see there's this little bit of moving in and out, and the rest of this episode is going to focus on correcting that and just improving our animation. But this is really the basics, and this is really kind of the kind of required part of getting a turntable animation. The next episode we'll talk about how to render out, because you're probably wondering, how can I render this? How can I render an animation? And the next episode we're going to talk about the steps to go through to make a rendered video. But the rest of this talk, the rest of this episode, we're just going to focus on improving the animation quality a little bit, getting rid of that in and out effect, and making a better animation. And then in the next episode, we'll do the video. Okay, so to fix that in out, so we're going to do a couple of things. This is all optional at this point. So we're going to go to the camera. We're going to select the camera. And then we're going to turn on what's called a motion trail. So if we go under the animation tab, here, we have the animation tab. We're going to go to the second thing, which looks like an arc with some lines in it. Make sure that we have the object selected, which is our camera that's moving. And we turn on this arc, and we will see the path that the camera takes over those 30 seconds with the keyframes marked in time. So this is a very useful tool because it shows you how the camera is moving over that time period. And you can see right away that the problem is the reason that it appears to kind of wobble in and out is because our motion path is not really circular. The interpolation is not really circular yet. There's a couple ways to fix this, and I'm going to show you both ways to do it. So let's stop the animation. On the right panel is where I'm going to do all my editing now. If I click on the motion path somewhere, I can of course click keyframes, but if I select the motion path If I right click, I'm going to do show in tangent. I need to select a keyframe for that. I'm going to do show in tangent and show out tangent. And it'll show me these lines coming out that indicate how the curve passes through that point. These curves are called Bezier curves. And what that means is that they interpolate by passing through multiple points, passing through the tangents of multiple points. So each of these has a tangent that indicates how the curve passes through it. I can actually edit the tangent, and that's one way to fix this is to edit the tangents by selecting the endpoint of the tangent. So I need to do two selections here. First, I select the key, and then I select the endpoint. And now I'm going to use the move tool, and I can actually move the tangent. And you can see it will change the shape of the curve. It will make it broader, or if I bring the tangent in, it will make it narrower. So this is modifying the tangent of a Bezier curve. I can make this broader. I need to make sure that I select the endpoint, because I can also just move the key itself. But here I want to actually move the endpoint and make it broader. Okay, so that's one way to do it, is you can adjust the in and out easing based on the tangents and to get a more circular curve. Another way to do it is to go to a portion of the curve, to right click and say modify keys, and then simply click on the curve to create a new key. You see that a new key was created here at around time 60. I can now just literally pull the curve out and change the shape of the curve that way. So this is another way, is by adding keyframes. I can do that again here. If I do right click, hold down, it's called a modal dialog, and then I do modify keys. And I'm going to click on the curve to create a new keyframe. And I'm going to literally drag the curve out by modifying that keyframe. We see our very last keyframe does not exactly line up. I can easily change that by simply moving the camera for that keyframe. Right? So it's getting closer to circular. Really, the tangent method is kind of more, they're both good ways to do this. The tangent is a little nicer because it doesn't result in more keyframes. I still have a fewer keyframes, but either method works. So that makes a more circular path. And now if I do the animation from the beginning again, I can click play, and you'll see that it looks very smooth and just rotates very smoothly. And looks much more like a kind of turntable animation. So that's basically it. That's how you create an animated turntable. We've created a number of keys and we animated them. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how to render this out and create a video. That's it. See you next time.